Is this live streamed? Okay, I don't know. Anyway, real quick, one sentence each. Who are you? What do you guys work on? Please, one sentence.
Okay. I'm Avi. I'm the CEO of Neil Foundation. We're building a layer 2 based on ZK sharding.
Hello, everyone. I'm Haichen Shen from Scroll. I'm the co-founder of the Scroll, and then we're building the native ZK EVM layer 2 for Ethereum.
Hey, I'm Elias, one of the co-founders of Kakarot. We're building proofs for the EVM ecosystem.
What does ZK sharding mean?
ZK sharding is the original Ethereum scaling vision with the addition of ZK and native interop between shards.
And why is that better than Arbitrum and Optimism and ZK Elastic Chain?
It offers control over the protocol such that you don't end up with fragmented state machines.
Can you explain further?
Sure. So with ZK, we get instant settlement, and we can, with a fixed protocol, sharded protocol, we can enforce interop between those state machines.
Is my mental model correct to think about that kind of like the AG layer?
The AG layer plus execution.
Right. So it's like, if you look at it from the perspective of a user, it's kind of like the rollups that opt into the AG layer plus the AG layer, and then you guys are building kind of that as like an end-to-end ecosystem.
Correct.
Gotcha. So what's the alternative or versus like the value prop over say like launching an OP stack rollup or maybe like ZK Elastic Chain rollup and then opting into the AG layer?
Well, once they ship.
Fair enough. All right, no more to be said there. Haichen, how's Scroll been doing? Right, like you guys obviously TG'd recently. What's the ecosystem like? What are the next plans for Scroll?
Yeah, our next plan is to just building like more ecosystem, like the continue building on that. Like we're also building more on, we're like the pushing more on the high performance of the to pushing like the throughput on the node side. And also on the meanwhile, like we're also building new ZK VM, trying to speed up, and then to our ultimate goal is to have like the real-time proving for the ZK ROPs.
Why do you think, like why didn't Arbitrum and Optimism push throughput? Like what's your opinion on why?
I think like that. So the reason that like so certain throughput like can unblock certain type of applications. Now like if you compare it to like say if you want to have all of the Visa or the Mastercard like the type of the applications to be on blockchain, now like currently the throughput is not enough like for them to sustain on those networks. So like we still need to keep pushing like once you like have like achieve different levels, then you can unblock a new type of applications to be enabled and then to have.
Well, I'm more like curious like why didn't they do it earlier, right? Like Base pushed throughput and then now Starknet is doing. I think Starknet enabled block STM. I think they're doing parallel execution. I think they're clocking in at like maximum, I don't know, like 1,000 TPS on like their internal benchmarks. But like, why didn't Arbitrum and Optimism do this earlier? Like, do you think that was a mistake?
Well, why would you need it?
You're saying that they just didn't need it because the transaction demand was not there?
But you
can't.
Also, you can't somehow, because if you use like OPDA, so you post all the transactions. With the current state of blobs, the ceiling is 200 TPS, maybe 300, so you couldn't do 1,000 TPS even if you wanted, unless you would congest the blob prices, and then kind of everyone would run into some problems. But Geth, I've been told, can go to 3,000 TPS if you just run it, if you just clock it.
So L1 constraints, DA constraints.
Yeah, it makes
I
sense.
think I'd add one more. I just think there's like a cultural like. L2s, especially the early ones, adopted like a cultural sort of framework that was very similar to Ethereum, which was like slow innovation, very like optimal design, and that probably had a bit to do with it.
Well, so my understanding of Neil again is that you guys are allowing people to spin up rollups, right?
No.
No.
No. The network is fixed. We do everything in protocol, and that's how we ensure that there's interop and
so is there
cross-shard
kind of like a
composability in perpetuity.
So is there like a set number of allocated like shards in the ZK sharding mech?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. What about Elias? Like, what's Kakarot up to nowadays? What's next for you guys?
I think next is mainnet. So the project started 2 years ago as R&D. Now, like 6 months later, it got into a project, like actual going for prod. Now we're 4 months in testnet, soon mainnet. On Starknet, so inside Starknet. And then I think the end game is really bringing ZK to L1 with ZK sharding, but for EVM, for Ethereum L1. And just overall making sure the billions of blocks that are being produced every year are proven.
And
Are you talking with the EF about bringing Cairo to the L1?
Yes. I mean, it has been mentioned. I think it's a long road, but we've been talking about designs for just how do you prove under 4 seconds a block and make L1 like just a settlement.
what does that mean, like bringing Cairo to the L1?
Do you want to explain, since you're...
I mean, it can mean many things. I think in this context, it means make it so that every blocks are proven using Cairo as a ZK prover, and make sure that every block of L1 is proven.
Yeah, I think Vitalik kind of proposed this in his recent series of blog posts, where you split away execution and you potentially even abandon the EVM to a certain degree.
Wow.
At the base layer, and you enshrine a ZKVM, whether it's Cairo or RISC-V based ZKVM, and you run like an ETH execution client sort of outside of it and just have it proven. But what's within the base layer is just an enshrined ZKVM like Cairo or RISC-V.
Are you guys worried about that vision? Because then, like, why would you need Starknet?
I think it's totally fine. Like I think like currently the bottleneck is like for all the layer 2s. Sometimes like you settle, like you wait until the layer 1 to settle. So like if the layer 1 has the ZKVM, now like it settle faster. Now like it benefits all of the layer 2s. I think layer 2 still benefit from the layer 1 for making more improvement. For example, like increasing the DA bandwidth so that like, layer 2 can achieve higher limit of the throughput. So similarly for the ZKVM, I think that's like a goal like that for layer 1 to achieve the single slot finality. Now, like all the layer 2 can be finalized faster, and then like if the layer 1 is finalized within a single slot, then probably interoperability can be much easier. Yeah.
I think the other piece is, based on what was announced yesterday, we probably have like a few decades, between now and then.
Few decades. Wow.
But it doesn't really matter in the sense that if someone writes a prover for SVM, like Eclipse, someone writes a prover for Starknet, someone writes a prover for Scroll, and then you roll up many blocks, you batch them, and then you submit the proof to L1, which is what you're doing today. The UX is not going to change so much as to what we're describing in the long-term vision. The long-term vision is really infra-centric, it's not user-centric. What we're doing in the ecosystem is we go from a user-centric goal, like sub 200 millisecond response time. We build something that is like suboptimal in the infra side today, which is in prod, like Arbitrum 1, let's say. It's suboptimal because you have 7-day finality instead of few seconds. And then we work our way up to the ideal vision. But UX won't change that much if that vision is, we snap our fingers and it's done today.
You mentioned that Kakarot is building kind of like proving infrastructure, but like, could you give us a little bit more specifics in terms of like what is the product that users can interact with soon on mainnet?
So the product that users can interact with on mainnet is an interop module on Starknet that allows EVM usage directly inside Starknet, like embedded, enshrined. Down the line, what ZK looks like in the land of Ethereum is completely invisible to users. So users will not even know that ZK exists. And
like today, I don't know ZKs exist on like ZK Sync or Scroll. Like I just use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So down the line is just Kakarot would work with roll-up as a service providers or chains and just prove blocks. A lot of them very cheaply, very fast, and aggregate them.
What does it mean that it's enshrined?
It's the sense that we have been using ZK EVM and rollup as interchangeable. So when you launch a ZK EVM, people think you launch a rollup. But Kakarot is the only ZK EVM that's not a rollup. It's either a runtime inside Starknet or it's like a chain agnostic EVM prover. So you're really using mainly the EVM
like
part.
Seth.
Exactly like Seth.
Okay. One thing I'm curious about, Haichen, is like, what do you think about the response of Scroll's launch, and like, what is the future of EVM L2s that are not, say, Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, that were there first and had an ecosystem and had differentiated dApps? Like now there's, I think even during DevCon, like 3 people launched EVM L2s. I'm pretty sure like Namechain launched, and then Zerion Chain, I don't know, like 3-4 people launched EVM L2s. So like, what is the path forward?
I think so first of all so Base Optimism Arbitrum, they already hold a lot of traffic, but I think that's not the end of the world. Like so, I think like so for example like a lot of assets are still on the Ethereum, not on the layer 2. So how to like push out like on more of the those like assets like moving like onto the layer 2. And the second is like if you look at all of the users and then compared to all of the Web 2 real users, like still a small fraction of
like why? Yeah. How do you get them on? Like,
yeah,
like why would they use it?
And then that's like the reason like the why layer 2 exists. Like it's the Ethereum like a more as like a decentralized protocols like Ethereum Foundation is like more just focusing on building the infrastructure and putting out on the roadmap of the whole Ethereum. Now the layer 2 can do more like grounded work to reach out to the real world, to the developing world, and then to find the people like need to use the blockchains to unblock their use cases like which they may not be able to do like with the existing infrastructures from like some financial. Like in Africa, like they don't have a very solid, reliable financial systems that they cannot use. Like now they're using a lot of, I think like a suboptimal, like they're using some centralized exchange to send transform like the fund. But like if you can use all of layer 2s, then that could be something like a good for benefit for all of the people.
Are you saying that Web 2 actors will look at the top 3 when they integrate? So it's a flywheel and it's a BD hell.
I'm not even sure if they, like not actors or institutions or companies, I'm even talking about like users, right? I think like the longer you take to launch, and especially if at the end of the day, like your block space and your applications and kind of the experience of interacting with the chain looks relatively similar to a lot of the previous people that came before you, like there's not a lot of moat, right? In terms of actually being able to attract users to transact on your chain, right? And that to me, it seems like there's this fallacious thinking today that people think you launch a chain, you automatically get a premium in terms of valuation. Like, how is that true? If
it is true, though. I mean, that's just where private capital flows. Like, if you launch as a chain...
Do you think that's still true?
Yeah, 100%.
Like today?
I mean, look at Unichain.
What about Mode?
Sure, Unichain is a good example, right? Like, why does Uniswap need a chain?
What about DMT?
Listen, what we do is like the antithesis to app chains, right? And I think actually, why, like I think it's important to revisit, like why are there even rollups? Why did we even kind of like, how did we end up here? And it was a function of we need more scale, right? It wasn't that we needed customization or we needed, apps needed sovereignty or all of these kind of like mental gymnastics that we've now like ended up in today. It was purely a decision of scale. And that was correct, right? But we ended up with money flowing into this new infrastructure. You had a bunch of builders building, frankly, just undifferentiated products, and we have an overabundance of supply. So all of this stuff looks completely useless. But eventually, if you believe that these systems run global financial systems, it's correct, because you cannot run a financial system on a single server. You need to be running many, many servers over many, many state routes at once. And so, yeah, I think like the L2 and rollup-centric roadmap gets a lot of flack today because we're really like, for lack of a better term, very early, right?
So that reminds me of this tweet that Bo from Polymer wrote. He was like, in order to support Uber in New York City, you need 10,000 mega ETHs. And that's kind of like a comical story. But like,
it's true though. It's true. You can't look behind these systems. You cannot run anything of global scale on a single server.
What do you think will get us to TX demand?
The Nasdaq is not a single server. The Nasdaq is a collection. It's a cluster of servers, geolocated, and you have markets that are sharded, running on that cluster, right? And so even in some ways, there's like this cognitive dissonance with Solana in that, oh yes, we're going to build like the Nasdaq and we're going to run it all over a single server. This is like, frankly, a bit of a ridiculous idea.
Can you please say it to the count for the clips? So I'm curious then, like you guys have a fixed number of shards now, or can you guys arbitrarily increase the number of shards ad infinitum?
Yeah, we plan to increase the number of shards as we need them, but today, just as L2s and app chains are, as a scalability solution, really not necessary, neither is sharding. But eventually it will be. If you do believe that these systems, we reach global scaled applications, just one globally scaled application, you're going to need this system of many servers running over many state routes all at once. And the thing about sharding is that we are able to fix essentially all of those state machines within one network, within one protocol, and push upgrades in arguably a much more seamless way than if you're trying to work backwards from these sort of independent roll-up state machines and coordinate across, a heterogeneous party of people.
So to you, what does Solana look like in 5 years?
Nil.
Great answer. So I'm curious, for you two, like you guys are thinking about scalability, onboarding, a lot more TX demand. Where is the TX demand going to come from? Like, what are people going to do on chain that induces this much TX demand that requires you to have additional scalability, real-time proving, extremely fast blocks?
I think like the so payment as an example like the so a lot of like the biggest use cases are the stable coins, which like if you think like the look at most of the use cases like that's across all of the blockchains. Like I think apart from the meme coin, like the biggest there is like just the stable coin payment, which like if you can scale that up, like bring more users on, like that definitely was meets the needs. And then I think like another thing is like the once the like all of the transactions now cheap enough, there's a lot of new use cases. Like for example, people just like having more like for example like the meme coins or all of the games like those kind of things like putting on the chains.
I guess like what use cases is Scroll excited about?
So
Like what are you like waking up out of bed and like I gotta turn on my computer and use the chain today?
The stable coin and the payment.
Gotcha. So one thing I'm curious about is, wouldn't you say that actually a ZK EVM is a bad design for stablecoin payments because of like global fee markets and like non-isolated state locality? Right? Like, wouldn't you want something that I'm not going to shill SVM, but like, wouldn't you want something that has like the ability to say you transacting on the chain and sending high volume stablecoin transfers has no effect on the fees of someone else doing that and no effect on the execution speed of someone else doing that? Like, if you're actually excited about stablecoin payments, isn't ZK EVM the wrong thing to be building?
No, I don't think so. Like, there's a lot of things you can do like with the EVM. I think like that's not like fundamental things like limitation of like between EVM and the SVM. That's like something you can also do like in.
I mean, I assume there's way more optimized things that you can do for like stablecoin payments. Like, I'm not too familiar, but like, yeah, like maybe you guys know like.
But the interest is network effects. Like 95% of all stablecoins live on EVM chains, and when people start building primitives using EVM targeted like protocols like Morpho, Aave, and so on, and then users on their app that completely abstracts away blockchain, but they are buying a product that gives them the risk-free rate on stablecoins, like borderlessly. This will benefit from network effects of EVM, and anyone can build local fees, even regardless of the VM choice.
I don't think that's true, right? Like, I don't think you can build local fee markets. And, like, I'm not saying that SVM has them, but like in a perfect way. But I'm not saying you can't build them while maximizing like parallel performance. You can only build them with state access limits, which basically restricts the number of processing power like each piece of state has access to within sequential execution. But anyway, like that's not important. What I'm more curious about is like, couldn't you have an L2 that is hyper optimized for stablecoin payments and then do something like Blast, where you put all the deposits on there into Maker or into Lido and still be able to harvest a risk-free yield? So like, why do you need some expressive virtual machine if you want to support stablecoin? I mean, we're kind of deviating, but I'm just curious.
I think like you can do that. I guess I think like that you can definitely do that. I think that all of the L2s could be able to do that. Again, just giving like the people yield, and then while you're still doing the stable coins, like like they have all of you only spend like a small portion of your stable coins, and the rest of them can still earn the yield. So I don't think like that's something like stopping like the layer 2s can do that.
Makes sense.
I think coming back to this point of like local like fee markets and local execution, like for the stablecoin example, I don't think you just want local fee markets over a single sort of state root generalized state machine. You want like local execution with an isolated fee market, and maybe there's sort of multi-dimensional fee market within that state machine. But the important thing is that it's a localized execution, right? And that's like actually something that you can do with rollups and something that you can do with ZK sharding.
Sounds like sharding.
Yes, you gotta bring it back home. What about you, Elias? What are you excited about in terms of like what do you wake up to use the chain for? Or what do you think people will wake up to use the chains for?
I mean, when I use on-chain, like the last use case where I thought this is actually useful is DCA on a DEX. So that's something I enjoyed because I'm not a good investor.
Same.
So I like to just set up some DCA over 6 months and not look at it.
Has it worked out?
Yeah. What else? I'm really excited for the next generation of proof generation. I think ZK has been too long. like a hype train over just some boring technology that you put on the behind the scenes that you shouldn't really be like talking about. So I'm excited for the 10x cheaper to come every 6 months, and for ZK to finally be this invisible technology that's a no-brainer to adopt, rather than emotional debate like, oh no, pick ZK, no, pick optimistic.
Wait, so if it's 10x cheaper, like what difference does that make to me as an end user, right? Because to me, I can use Base for like less than a cent today. I can use Optimism for less than a cent today. And those are kind of, I think, the two biggest use cases of ZK. I haven't personally used ZK Email, ZK TLS. And I've used risk zero as well. Like that would be very interesting if I can prove arbitrary computation like within a very short period of time that is already expressive and don't have to do the overhead of writing my own circuits. But I'm curious, like in the case of a ZK EVM or in the case of you guys, like when you do get real-time proving, super fast, super cheap, like what does that look like that's beneficial to the user?
So I think it will be beneficial to the user. They might not know because it will be. If you're using today an optimistic chain, there is more security risks than you would get on a like mature ZK system, and this comes from a underappreciated risk of a fraud-proof system is the risk of an attack, which is today mitigated by the fact that there is a security council that can just blacklist an attacker. But long term, it's going to take a lot of research. But if you have a few million or a few $billion, you can attack. So today, an attacker could just, granted there's no security council, an attacker with the same amount of cash than the entirety of Optimism mainnet, for example, could drain Optimism mainnet. So there's this idea that with the same, you need $1 as a defender, that $1 of an attacker is investing to attack your chain. Long term, this is not sustainable for financial systems that to have such a vast area of attack.
Yeah, I feel like ZK is in this really weird place because it was so overhyped and like promised to end users as this like magical technology that's going to solve all your problems and enable all these new use cases. And in reality, it's just like cloud computing. Like it's not a visceral, like you don't feel it. It's not something that end users should care about, really. But like cloud computing, it really opens up like a new generation of trustless applications that you can run at really large scale. And eventually you'll have applications that do so, right? Like a ZK sharded, L2, or a collection of ZK rollups, or a snarkified L1, right? And these things will be able to handle global scale, but I don't think a user will ever feel that. Just like a user doesn't feel really TPS, right? Like they just feel that their transaction is fast and settled like cheaply, and there's like good uptime. Like, and even in those things, they're not like visceral experiences. So yeah, I almost think like the healthy thing for ZK to do is just kind of like drift off into the background. Like it should stop being like, this is a ZK application, or ZK still holds this promise. Like it's here. It's just we're not going to feel it.
I think we're in agreement, but at the end of the day, like as you mentioned, it's kind of like once the technology gets better, the end user does feel the fact that there is a 10x better technology in the back end, right?
So they feel an application, right? Like you feel like I can order like a car immediately anywhere in the world.
So you feel it, right? Like, but that's because of ZK. You don't have to know that it's ZK, but
right. You're never thinking about that.
Exactly.
Right? You're thinking about the
like we're in absolute,
yeah.
We're in agreement here.
I think like one thing is like for example, what optimistic router cannot do is like if you want to move $1 million from layer 2 to layer 1, that's something like you cannot do through like third-party bridges. Now like you can wait 7 days. Like that's like a where the ZK will clicking and then just make it like a very smooth, right? So imagine like if you can buy a house just using the stable coins on the chain, like but like not everyone has like a wallet that like probably assets like want to receive on every chain. Now what are you going to do like if you want to receive like pay $1 million chain like from scroll like to Arbitrum, from Arbitrum like to scroll? That's like not possible.
What's like the maximum size you can move like off of chain at once, like on an optimistic rollup? Like do you guys know? Like without incurring say above 1% slippage. Like, do you guys have a measurement?
Executing trades or
yeah. Say like I want to like use like relay, some intent bridge, or some like third-party liquidity bridge to move off optimistic rollup with instant like access to my funds on the other side. Like, do you guys know? Because Haichen was saying like the reason why you need ZK as an infrastructure is you can do that type of like big size.
You're talking about bridging.
Yeah, bridging.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think like at least like a million is not possible. I don't know the exact number, like the threshold, like the for like something like I think like a million is not possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I imagine that's just something that like that whatever that margin is, it gets competed away over time, right? And then eventually you do hit a point where you have like real-time proof generation, and yeah, you're just like relying on the cryptographic guarantees of whatever that bridge is. I mean, until then, you really just see like this race to zero, like people, these solvers or market makers just competing their margin away.
Yeah, that's like that's something I'm always curious about the ag layer, right? It's like if I use Relay right now, I can bridge in and out like 20 ETH, like while paying like less than $5, $10, like super fast, super cheap, especially between large liquidity layers. So then if I'm using the ag layer or ZK sharding, where you have this mechanism where you amortize the shared validity costs of settlement down to the L1 such that, like interop between the shards is very cheap, then like what is the actual gain to the user in terms of, that bridge fee going down?
Right. I see what you're saying. Like essentially like whatever you can offer as like a market maker solver in that relay bridge.
Like the settlement costs go down if you use ag layer or nil.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like the margin's already so low, like is there a 10x improvement to be had?
Right. I mean, probably not. Right. There's
maybe for like long tail, maybe for like long tail domains,
sure,
long tail assets.
Yeah, for very illiquid assets, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
I don't know how much money is that, but capital opportunity costs for solvers that need to rebalance capital. So they are proposing you the fast bridge, but they have to rotate capital with the 7-day withdrawal period. Or like someone has to bear that risk at the end of the day.
Totally, yeah.
So I imagine the minimal value for society is the risk-free rate times 7 days times what you're locking into the bridge.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah. So I want to talk about path dependence, right? Like I agree, and I think everyone does agree that if you want to have internet scale throughput and usage, you do need some form of roll-up-centric roadmap. You do need 1,000, 1,000,000 roll-ups with a shared settlement layer maybe. But in the path to getting there, right, there are people who maybe get disillusioned by the fact that if you go this path, there are short-term pains but long-term gains. Do you think then that there is some credence to kind of Solana's idea of saying today we're going to have completely shared state until the fact that we hit a technical bottleneck, then we're going to kind of switch around and see what we can do, maybe like network extensions or sharding or whatever that may be? Or do you think it's just the right thing to do to just be like, okay, that's the end state, we're just going to be there even though transaction demand is not there yet?
I mean, I think it's important to just like zoom out and take a look at like what Solana was in 2019, like 2018, 2019, right? It was not, like it was effectively where we're all at with L2s and sharding today. Like it was not a useful thing. It wasn't that they were solving like a meaningful problem. It just so happened that they made the right technological bet and it's paying dividends today. And yeah, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, like look, like Solana did the right thing. But that doesn't mean that the L2 thing, the app chain thing, the sharding thing is wrong, right? It just may be that we haven't progressed that far down the timeline yet.
So I guess a better way to phrase this question is like what do you guys see as the sequence of events in which case, by which the L2 roadmap has a godlike vindication?
More Solana outages, maybe? I think at least in the near term. And then I think at some point you reach a saturation of whatever the supply capacity of Solana is, right? And you say, okay, well, where do we go from here? I think the other end is, like right now, if you think about like how the market is structured, like everything is, especially on Solana, is very oriented towards retail. I think once we see institutions, which are set to come, they'll have a very different framework of risk and security than retail. And I think it will, a lot of like, in sort of the near term, path dependency will depend on how they perceive that risk, how they perceive security. I think it could be very likely that they would rather opt for something like, an Ethereum secured layer 2 as opposed to something like Solana.
Oh yeah, I would say like that there could be like a layer 2 that's like upturns the Solana throughput. So you can their layer 2 can be like has higher throughput. Although like there like also like a path, like for example, Ethereum need to ship the full dank sharding, so like they can have like more higher DA bandwidth. But like there's like a layer 2, they can be like the higher performance than Solana. It's possible.
I feel Layer 2 got a lot of trouble for 2 or 3 reasons. One is they raised during a giga bull market, and their equity value was so high that kind of they set themselves up for failure with regards to their like token prices. Whereas Solana, the ICO was such low price that the VCs and the people that were in early Solana got immensely rich and then were able to pour capital during the bear into many projects, and those projects are coming to fruition today. So I think that's one reason. A second reason I would argue is we got bad buzz on rollup because usage is so fragmented. Because if you think about it, usage, at least on Arbitrum 1, I'm not from Arbitrum 1, but you're getting 200 millisecond response time, which is ISO Solana, like same as Solana. Prices since 8 months for blobs are not so far from Solana. So what do we miss? We just miss the fact that now I have to know on which rollup I am. I can rect funds if I bridge to Polygon safe and not Polygon ZK EVM safe. You have to be cognizant of way too many things as a user. You can still rect your keys by pushing them. So I think the world in which rollup succeed is the world in which wallets abstract away a few chains and users don't really know about crypto. They use passkey, they use guardians, and prices are, they don't even pay the price of transaction fees. They don't know that blockchain exists, and even less so ZK.
As rollups, how do you guys think about, well, not you, but like as rollups, how do you guys think about chain abstraction?
I do think like the chain abstraction will happen. Like because like I feel like the chain is more operating as infrastructures, and it will be like somehow like it's better like to be agnostic to the users. Like user will just like I want to do something, I want to buy something, or like then it will be like the not like so like attached to like knowing like which chain I need to be on.
So you're saying it will happen or it will not? It will.
It will.
It will happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any will nots?
No.
Nope. What does value accrual look like in a chain abstracted world for infrastructure?
I kind of want you to answer this question because I mean you're building an SVM L2, right? And I think like core to what your thesis is that the SVM is more scalable, and therefore you can have and the SVM will enable this composability across applications, and yeah. So how do you think about like chain abstraction offering that composability?
I don't think chains will be abstracted for as long as people are here for speculation. And I think largely what that is downstream of the fact that Bitcoin is a $2 trillion asset, and L1 and L2s have generally had premiums over applications. And I think that happens because of people think, oh, this is L1, this is L2, you immediately comp it to other sources of selling block space. And what that means is L1, L2 tokens have generally had a higher ceiling, especially if you have a marquee brand. Say now, people are launching through Conduit, Caldera, it hasn't looked the same. But what that means is then that speculative attention kind of pulls in at that L1, L2 layer, and therefore you have sticky users, and you kind of, as a back-end technology, have somehow a community, right? And therefore, what that means is that order flow originates from your chain. And if order flow originates from the fact that you are your chain, not from the fact that this application is on some back-end, then that is very difficult to chain abstract. And I think this is the strategy that, say, Near and Polaris from Osmosis are taking, which is that, okay, users are already on our chain, and therefore we want to be the source by which we branch out different chain abstracted intents and receive back proofs, so that we become kind of the settlement layer and order flow aggregation layer for people to do these type of cross ecosystem chain abstracted activities.
Yeah, I think the other is just like the race for content, right, and token issuance on your chain, right? Like those assets are likely very sticky, and if you can become the dominant chain with network effects for token issuance, then you have like a really fertile foundation for having a moat around content.
How do you develop that?
I think it's an emergent property. And I think like if you look empirically, that's how it's happened, right? It took how many years? 4 years for Uniswap to emerge on Ethereum. It took several for the ICO boom. Solana pump.fun. That was a totally random emergent sort of use case. But you see this with it an explosion of token issuance. And I think the key, like as infrastructure builders, is like one, you need to be supporting builders such that they can produce this content, right? So that you have these emergent sort of sparks. But two, you need to be building reliable infrastructure, right? And such that when that happens, your chain is able to scale. You have uptime. You have security guarantees. You don't end up like Terra or something.
I think we can also see it from the standpoint of negotiating power. Today, Unichain was launched on this idea that if your application on a rollup, revenue share is not well defined, in the sense that you can have fees, but for example, today on Base, congestion fees go to Coinbase. And I think it's in the millions per week currently, because on a layer 1, when there's congestion, prices go up, but you burn the ETH that's used to pay congestion. On layer 2s, it goes directly in the sequencer's pocket. So as apps, you're thinking, okay, my negotiation power is if I go to Base or Arbitrum 1 or Scroll, I'm going to get adoption, and I will revenue share the block space with the actor. But tomorrow, we're not in the Web 2 space where everything is under license. The OP stack is open licensed, and there are many roll-up as a service provider. So when you're an app and you feel like the revenue share is not fair, maybe you drive 40% of the activity on chain, you're thinking, okay, I'm not getting my money where it's supposed to be. So chains can invent revenue share models. They can invent local sequencing. They can invent many ways to get to the same thing, which is how much should I be getting, how much should you be getting, and can we stay friends?
So Blast and Mode, do this type of priority fee revenue share.
Starknet as well.
Interesting. I didn't know. Like Starknet mainnet does well.
Yeah, it's called Devonomics. I think it's just not regular. It's not periodic, sorry, but it has happened over like millions.
Oh, interesting. Did not know that. How do you encourage? Sorry, go.
I was going to ask, do you think Base stays in L2?
So, can we agree that on what L2 should be? Should it have like a validating bridge and like a security system that validates the state root transition?
Do you think Base continues to use Ethereum for full DA?
In the future or now?
Yeah, in the future.
I don't know if it's a spicy take, but I think if Base continues in the compliance on-chain kind of real-world activity, I think they'll piggyback of mega ETH software or 10K TPS software that's being built by Monad, for example, and they'll kind of use it as a. So I think they might become less of a L2 over time to boost. They want to boost mega gas every week, so I think in 2 years they'll just adopt like a 10K TPS.
Well, I think it's an interesting question because we started with like what is the bottleneck for rollups today, like increasing TPS, right? We talked about
that
like
was the original question.
right, and like you look at the rollup that has content, token issuance, momentum, like the best distribution, and a very aggressive roadmap to scale TPS. Like logically, I think we'd all be lying to ourselves if we believe that they're going to remain like a full ETH rollup.
Then I think actually if they switch to ZK, let's say in 3 years the superchain adopts like ZK for their state transition, there's an upgrade. And then by using ZK, you can now use this primitive called state diffs instead of posting full transactions. And then maybe this allows chains to continue being on L1 DA, but have 10K TPS.
Or they build Coinbase DA.
True. We don't have much time. Final question, maybe a sentence each. As infrastructure providers, how do you encourage native asset issuance and increase native issuance velocity?
Well, come mint your tokens. But I think for us, it's probably going to be a function of like building interesting applications to see the ecosystem. Keep pushing and taking care of the infrastructure, and finding a few unique application categories that we think are going to grow 10, 100x over the next few years, and owning those. And hopefully the bet is right.
I have a question. Actually, maybe you might answer. For token issuance, do you value more security? So you will always want to issue your token on L1 and then bridge it with the canonical bridge? Or you value liquidity and volume, in which case you want to launch it on like hype chains? Or you value launching on your own terms?
What is the framework? What is the point of reference?
Sorry,
Like
token issuance. Would you always, as a rollup, always wanted to do it on L1 and then bridge to several ecosystems to provide liquidity? Or, I guess you asked, it was a different question? Or
Yeah, I was like, the value of a chain is largely related to native asset issuance and velocity of it. Like, how do you encourage it on your chain? Right? Obviously, it's like a different dichotomy. If you are someone who cares a lot about security, then you should mint it on L1 and bridge it onto an L2 in case something happens to L2. But like, if you are someone who wants to, just issue high velocity like assets that people can trade at a high speed, then it just makes sense to do it on the L2, right?
But is that your axiom? Like you're claiming that a rollup is successful if it has native issuance?
That was an obvious claim.
Yeah, well, I think that's like the lasting power of any of these like block space providers. Is like, what is the token issue? I mean, like, what is the content moat that you have? And really, that's I think today largely a function of what is your token issuance and velocity.
Like NFTs and then
Or
meme
just
coins.
yeah, just tokens.
So bridging from L1 counts as issuance for you or not?
I guess if vast majority of liquidity lives on the L2, then yes.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
you
think
want native state. Yeah.
All right, technically we're out of time. Any last words from anyone? Like 2 seconds.
I think like for us, like we're just building the best developer support and then program and to connect like, all of the developers. Like there will be like true believers, like friends of the scroll, like and then enlarge the circles, and to get like you get like more developers, you're getting the more native assets like the issued.
Awesome. Mint your assets. Scale the L2. Scale the L1. That's takeaway. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.